essence I'm going to spend with him today would definitely be provoking our thinking process. I just want to share a few thoughts before I could call it a day for felicitation. I was sharing with him about the kind of challenges that the Christian college and other higher education institutions are going through during post-pandemic dispensation. We had a discussion yesterday with some of our NSS volunteers and program officers where we find that staggered behavioral patterns becomes a very important issue of concern among the students that we all are facing here. 2 years of confinement, almost 2 years of confinement has led to a discontinuity that normally they learn from social intelligence in the campus. The kind of a personality trait that they would acquire through the outside class experiences of Madras Christian College is lacking among students, and we find it as a big challenge for us to bring them back to the normalcy or looking forward for a good graduate outcome. It becomes a big challenge for all of us. It's a huge challenge for all of us. And in this context, when you look into education in a very comprehensive perspective, where church plays a vital role in education seems to be very, very relevant for me too. And we know that every 100 years we encounter pandemic, and every pandemic confinement probably have resulted in educational renaissance or any other transformation. We all know that the 14th century Black Death, almost half of the world's population were consumed, and we could also witness a lot of transformations in the socio-economical scenario. I do not know whether history repeats linearly. History is a non-linear process. In case history repeats itself linearly, we can also expect a reformation in the education too. And incidentally, when I look at the third education revolution, I could reflect on my own thought with Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi. So I am very much inquisitive in learning from him on his own thought process on this particular aspect. I also agree with him in certain aspects that the present day education is completely moving towards a different direction. The whole global need is a kind of a ratio, a proper ratio between thinkers and tinkers. And the government of India is moving towards creating more thinkers. And more thinkers also would be a problem for us. And thinkers also equally required for all of us. And when it comes to vocational education, where church could really play a vital role, I think this would be a wonderful opportunity for transforming the whole global scenario where we are all heading towards a knowledge economy. And when it comes to vocational education, church has a vital role to play, and again, our institution also has activated its vocational education through the community colleges, where we have been recognized by the National Skill Development Corporation recently. And we have been contemplating on offering courses that would really help many downtrodden students. In addition, we have been working with pastors. Dr. Ross would probably explain to in case you have any clarification. We have started rehabilitating pastors who have skills by repurposing them. And we don't want pastors to look forward for a tithe, and they should survive on their own during this, using their skills. And some of the program is also going on in these directions where we would like to really develop skills among the pastors and make them to stand on their own and do the ministry of God faithfully without looking for any economical benefit from other side. Sometimes they move away from the track, ethical track. So these are few glimpses that I couldn't just present before you from the institution, and I'm sure that the outcome of this particular talk from Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi would definitely add value to the transformation of the educational scenario in Madras Christian College. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We at the Madras Christian College are privileged and truly delighted to have our speaker, Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi, to be with us this morning. And we from Madras Christian College would like to present him a small memento, and I request our dear principal to hand over the memento to Dr. Vishal. I feel elated to introduce Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi, a social reformer, writer, philosopher, and a lecturer. Coupled with spirituality, his intellectual knowledge and scholarly experience have fetched him great laurels. He worked for the liberation and empowerment of the poor peasants, and as a result of the services rendered and his innovative ideas, he was bestowed with the Dr. Bimrao Ambedkar Distinguished National Service Award. Academic excellence, spiritual vitality, and social relevance are the three guiding principles for the Madras Christian College. And Dr. Vishal is an academician, a renowned researcher, philosopher, and a well-lettered person known for his scholarly expertise. He is a Bible scholar, having experienced the touch of his Creator, and has been inspiring lives through his lectures. A social activist and reformer who serves the community with passion and love. May I be allowed to say that here is a person who's known for his services to our society through his head, heart, and hands. It's truly our privilege to have such an eminent personality to share with us on the topic, the third education revolution. A man who is an embodiment of the guiding principles of our great institution. What better person can we think of than Dr. Vishal Mangalwadi to talk to us on this topic, the third education revolution. And that's what he's going to talk about. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Dr. Vishal into our midst.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Dr. Wilson and Dr. Ross, for this great honor. It is actually very humbling to be here in this sacred temple of learning, which has contributed so immensely, not just to South India, but to the whole nation. So I'm very grateful. I know only very little of your history that Dr. Joshua Kalapati and others have taught me about this institution, but instead of recounting any of that in the next 30 minutes or so, let me focus directly on the proposal for the third education revolution. This revolution is very simple. It is saying that you have outstanding professors and teachers here in MCC. They are confined because of number of limitations to be teaching 50 students a day. How about if we make it possible for them to teach 50 lakh students a lesson which is very well prepared, which is filmed, which is edited with music and illustrations with your media department, which is critically reviewed, peer-reviewed lecture. If we can take it to 50 lakh students all over the country and beyond into Bangladesh and Pakistan and Afghanistan and Nepal and Myanmar, that's the third education revolution. Technologically, it's possible, and you know that. Khan Academy is one of the world's best math teacher, and no school really needs to hire a teacher of mathematics. What you need is a mentor who is helping students to learn from Khan Academy, putting that all into Tamil and Telugu and Hindi and Indian languages. That's simply the vision. I had proposed this In 2009, in a book called Truth and Transformation, and in the third appendix, this proposal had been made. Indonesians were the first to accept it. They called a conference of Christian leaders in Indonesia in 2009 to launch the Indonesian Bahasa edition of that book. And they called their conference Transform Indonesia. When I went there, there was a learned professor of education who had taught in a Christian university, then worked for the government in the Ministry of Education. He gave a brilliant paper full of charts and studies and statistics to argue that Christian education has no future in Indonesia. Quality of our teaching is declining because we'll keep losing the best professors to secular and government institutions. So even Christian parents don't want to send their students, their children, to our institutions. Our quality is declining, our fees is increasing, our buildings are falling apart. Christian education has no future. Since I was present in that particular seminar, the moderator said, we'll first have Dr. Mangalwadi respond before we open her up for discussion. And I took up the offer and suggested that actually Indonesia can be reformed. What you need is 10,000 churches who are taking the best courses from your universities into the church through the internet, and local students come to the church 5 days a week. A Muslim young woman who cannot go to the city to attend a college comes to the local church, bicycles or walks. And that's where she's learning from the best teachers available in Indonesia, including practical subjects such as agriculture. All the theory is online. Experiments are on virtual reality there in the church. There is an agriculture extension worker who is covering 10 villages. Monday morning he's here, Monday afternoon he's there. And students from those villages are gathering on a model farm which is owned by one of the students, but supervised by the university. And that's where practical lessons are happening. When a problem comes which the extension worker cannot solve, back then he just has to open his mobile or iPad with Skype. Now Ruatech has just yesterday launched a new program where you can open with your mobile, see the problem, talk to the professor in the university, and professor of agriculture or soil sciences or agronomy, etc. And if he cannot solve the problem online, you take that plant to the agricultural university along with the soil, etc., and then information comes back. Solutions come back. So practical topics, including pre-medicine and pre-engineering courses, can all be done in the local church using available technology. And that's where I'm very grateful to Ruatech for inviting me to Chennai. And they are the technology group that have produced that book, The Third Education Revolution. 2 of the chapters there are by the founders of Ruatech Solutions. And technology is available, and I think they have some kind of relationship with your media and technology department as well. This is possible now to take the best education into every church. And if a mosque or a temple wants to use the curriculum that you are teaching, they would be very welcome. This is going to bring the cost of education down, improve the quality of education, because a teacher who is teaching a course in public, online, he will have to get his lecture peer-reviewed. But it will also be enhanced by the videographers and animators and illustrators and musicians who will make it accessible and put into different languages. The professor may not be able to lecture in Hindi, but there is no reason why his voice cannot be removed. English or Tamil cannot be removed in Hindi, professional voice put. So people are still seeing him, a professor from MCC, but they are listening in Hindi. And the advantage of this is that students can always pause the professor, and they can even rewind the professor. And when they are finished listening to the professor, they can say, please lecture again. So the professor may have to give the same lecture 3 times in a day. He will get more money, because this makes no sense for a professor to be repeating a lecture on Shakespeare for 30 years every year. If he gives the lecture once, he can improve it in the days ahead, but that lecture can be studied at a student's convenience, at his leisure, and 3 or 4 students studying the lecture, discussing with the professor. And if they disagree with the professor or do not understand him, they can organize through the professor's secretary or teaching assistant a 15-minute Zoom conference, or Ruatech conference would be even better. They can and have clarifications which can be saved and which can be posted online, so future students who have same kind of questions, they first go through the answers that have already been given and explanations that have already been given. So this movement picked up momentum in 2019, where a particular denomination, a Pentecostal denomination in Uganda, they have 4 of those associations. The largest one has 30,000 churches, and they invited me to spend time, 5 days, with 240 leaders of that denomination. For 50 years, the church has been the most thriving and dynamic association in Uganda, but they had been impacted by a particular brand of American Christianity which did not believe in the necessity of cultivating the mind. That God is a rational person, He is the Word, and to be godly, we have to cultivate our mind. This is not part of universal Christian theology. Orthodox churches in Russia, Ukraine, and Greece, for example, they never built a single Christian university because they didn't believe that to be godlike, to be godly, you have to cultivate your mind. This was an insight which came from Judaism to St. Augustine, 500 years after Christ, and he wrote the curriculum of the what became the first education revolution in Europe during the Carolingian Renaissance, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes. So Augustinian monasteries grew into universities. A part of the Roman Catholic tradition invented the institution of the university. The very first university was in Italy, University of Bologna, which began as a law college, and then in France, the medical university, etc. So for the first 4.5 centuries of the university life, from until 1500, 1520 or so, the universities had 4 departments: theology, philosophy, medicine, and law. These were the 4 departments. Departments of sciences grew out of the Department of Theology and Philosophy. So when Isaac Newton went to Cambridge, which was which began as an Augustinian monastery, and by the time of Newton it had already become a university, there was no department of science in Cambridge.